The emergency signal cut through every conversation in the council chamber. Rebecca Lane looked up from her datapad as the holographic display flickered to life above the central platform. Red warnings pulsed across the projection like a heartbeat racing toward panic. Outpost 7 has gone dark, the automated voice announced. 212 individuals trapped. Atmospheric breach imminent. Rebecca stood from her seat near the back wall. As Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, she had learned to stay quiet during most sessions. Humans were the newest members, barely 3 years into their membership. Most species still viewed them as curious newcomers rather than equals. Commander Talrek moved to the center display with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his own authority. His scales caught the red emergency lights, making him look like he was carved from polished stone. 40 years of military service across a dozen campaigns had earned him respect from every corner of council space. "The situation is clear," Talrek said, his voice carrying easily across the chamber. Outpost 7 sits on a mining moon with extreme gravity and a toxic atmosphere. Equipment failure has sealed the main facility. We have 48 hours before their life support fails completely. Rebecca pulled up the facility schematics on her personal display. Her eyes moved quickly across the layout, absorbing details. The outpost had been built into the side of a cliff face, with most of the habitable areas deep underground. The main entrance had collapsed, but there were maintenance tunnels, air shafts, and secondary access points that most military planners would overlook. "I propose a medical-focused extraction," Rebecca said, stepping forward. "The facility layout suggests we can reach survivors through auxiliary tunnels. We should prioritize medical assessment and stabilization before attempting large-scale movement." Talrek turned to look at her. His expression was not hostile, merely dismissive, the way someone might regard a child who had interrupted an important discussion. "Dr. Lane," he said, and the title sounded almost mocking in his mouth. "This situation requires strength and military precision. The environment is hostile. 2.3 times your Earth gravity. Sulfur-based atmosphere that will eat through standard equipment. Seismic instability that could trigger collapses at any moment." He gestured at the holographic display, where images of the moon's surface showed violent storms and cracked terrain. "This is not a medical emergency," Talrek continued. "This is a combat extraction from a war zone. We need soldiers, heavy equipment, and the fortitude to operate in conditions that would crush softer species." Rebecca felt the familiar weight of being underestimated settle over her shoulders. She had felt it in medical school when professors doubted her stamina. She had felt it during residency when senior doctors questioned her decisions. She had felt it on her first day at the council when other representatives spoke over her as if she were not there. "With respect, Commander," Rebecca said, keeping her voice level, "I have 17 years of emergency medicine experience. I have worked disaster zones, epidemic outbreaks, and mass casualty events. The survivors are not enemy combatants. They're injured, frightened people who need careful extraction." Talrek's inner eyelids flickered, a gesture Rebecca had learned indicated impatience in a species. "Your experience is noted," he said. "You may coordinate medical supplies from the station. I will lead the rescue mission personally with my tactical unit. We depart in 2 hours." The decision was made. Rebecca could see it in the way other council members had already turned their attention to logistics and deployment schedules. No one questioned Talrek. His record spoke for itself. Dozens of successful military operations. Hundreds of lives saved through decisive action and overwhelming force. Rebecca returned to her seat and continued studying the facility data. The more she read, the more concerned she became. Talrek's approach treated the outpost like an enemy fortification to be breached. His plan involved heavy drilling equipment, explosive charges to clear debris, and armored soldiers in full combat gear. But the facility was not built to withstand that kind of assault. The geological surveys showed fracture lines throughout the cliff face. The seismic sensors had been registering increasing instability for weeks before the collapse. Adding more violent force to an already unstable situation seemed like a terrible idea. She pulled up medical profiles of the trapped workers. Mixed species, mixed physiologies, mixed environmental needs. Several species that required immediate medical intervention if exposed to the moon's atmosphere, even briefly. Others that could not survive in the temperature extremes the facility was now experiencing. Rebecca made her decision quietly, the way she had learned to make most important decisions. She did not announce it. She did not ask permission. She simply gathered her equipment and headed for the docking bay. The human supply ship was small, designed for cargo runs rather than rescue operations. But it was fast and it was available. Rebecca loaded medical supplies, portable life support equipment, and her personal exploration suit. The suit had been modified based on her own specifications, lighter and more flexible than standard council equipment. She filed a flight plan listing her destination as a nearby research station. By the time anyone realized she was heading to Outpost 7 instead, she would already be entering the moon's atmosphere. As her ship pulled away from the council station, Rebecca looked at the emergency data one more time. Taurek's fleet was assembling on the far side of the station, massive military vessels built for warfare and siege operations. She thought about his words. Soft, weak, lacking fortitude. Rebecca had spent her entire career being underestimated. She had learned that arguing was less effective than simply doing the work and letting results speak for themselves. The moon appeared on her view screen, a scarred gray sphere wrapped in yellowish clouds. Storm systems raged across its surface. The gravity, pulled at her ship as she began her descent. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. The ship bucked and shook as it hit the upper atmosphere. Warning alarms sang their familiar songs. Rebecca ignored them, making constant small adjustments to keep her approach stable. Through the toxic clouds, she could just make out the cliff face where Outpost 7 was buried. Taurek thought she was too weak for harsh worlds. She was about to prove him wrong. The landing was rougher than Rebecca had hoped. Her ship hit the surface hard, skidding across loose rock before the stabilizers finally caught hold. Alarms screamed about hull stress and atmospheric contamination. She silenced them one by one and began her post-landing checklist. Outside the viewport, the moon's surface looked like something from a nightmare. Sulfur storms painted everything in shades of yellow and brown. The gravity pulled at her even through the ship's compensators. She felt heavy, as if her bones had suddenly doubled in weight. Rebecca sealed her suit and checked the seals twice. The atmosphere outside would kill her in minutes if even a small amount leaked through. She gathered her equipment pack, organized her medical supplies, and opened the airlock. The gravity hit her like a physical blow. 2.3 times Earth standard meant every step required more than twice the effort. Her equipment pack felt like it was full of stones, but she had trained for high-gravity environments during her council preparation. Her muscles remembered the techniques. Stay low, move deliberately, conserve energy. The facility entrance was 3 kilometers away across unstable terrain. Rebecca started walking. Each step was a deliberate choice. Test the ground. Shift weight. Move forward. The sulfur wind tore at her suit with chemical fingers. Visibility dropped to almost nothing during the worst gusts. She relied on her suit's navigation system and her own sense of direction. After 90 minutes of brutal hiking, she reached the cliff face. The main entrance was exactly as the reports had shown, completely buried under tons of collapsed rock. But Rebecca was not interested in the main entrance. She moved along the cliff face, running her gloved hand across the stone. Her suit's sensors fed her data about structural integrity, airflow, and temperature variations. There, a small vent shaft, barely wide enough for a person. Emergency protocols required all facilities to maintain multiple access points. Rebecca cleared debris from the opening and squeezed inside. The shaft angled downward at 45 degrees. She engaged her suit's climbing assists and began descending into darkness. The shaft opened into a maintenance tunnel after 20 meters. Rebecca pulled herself through and stood in the dim emergency lighting. The tunnel was narrow, barely tall enough for her to stand upright, but it was intact. She followed the tunnel deeper into the facility, checking her map display against the actual layout. Twice, she had to crawl through sections where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Her suit scraped against rock and metal. The gravity made every movement exhausting. Then she heard voices. Rebecca moved toward the sound and found herself looking through a partially blocked doorway into a storage area. 23 workers huddled in the space, their suits showing damage and low power warnings. They looked up as her helmet light swept across them. "Who are you?" The speaker was a Centaurian, his 4 arms wrapped around his torso for warmth. "Dr. Rebecca Lane, Council Medical Division," she said. "I'm here to help." One of the workers, an insectoid whose species Rebecca did not immediately recognize, made a chittering sound that her translator interpreted as bitter laughter. "One person? They sent one person." "The military rescue team is at the main entrance," Rebecca explained as she entered the space and began unpacking medical equipment. "But I thought this route might be faster. Who needs immediate medical attention?" They all started talking at once. Rebecca raised one hand for silence. "One at a time," she said firmly. "Let me assess everyone systematically." She moved through the group with practiced efficiency. 3 workers had broken bones. 5 showed signs of atmospheric poisoning from small suit leaks. 1, a Centaurian engineer named Norvin, was dying from exposure to the sulfur atmosphere. Rebecca knelt beside Norvin and examined his injuries. His species processed oxygen differently than humans. The sulfur had reacted with his respiratory system in ways that most council medics would not understand. But Rebecca had studied Centaurian physiology specifically because she knew they worked in dangerous environments. She pulled a custom medication from her pack and administered it directly into Norvin's central circulation system. Then she sealed his suit leaks with emergency patches and adjusted his internal atmosphere mix. "That should stabilize you," she said. "But you need proper medical care soon." Norvin's eyes focused on her with something like wonder. "You carry Centaurian-specific medications?" "I carry medications for 17 different species," Rebecca said. "When you work disaster response, you prepare for everyone." She treated the other injuries quickly, setting broken bones and administering medications. The workers watched her with growing hope. One of them, a Delphinian named Della with flexible octopus-like limbs, approached her. "There are more survivors deeper in the facility," Della said. "Many more. Over 100 trapped in 3 different sections. Communications are down. We do not know their conditions." Rebecca pulled up her facility map. "Show me where." Della pointed to locations on the display. Rebecca's heart sank. All 3 sections were deep inside the facility, past areas that showed severe structural damage. Her radio crackled to life. "This is Commander Taurek to any survivors. We are beginning breach operations at the main entrance. Prepare for extraction in 6 hours." Rebecca activated her transmitter. "Commander, this is Dr. Lane. I have reached survivors through an auxiliary tunnel. I am documenting alternative extraction routes that may be safer than forcing the main entrance." There was a long silence. Then Taurek's voice came back, tight with controlled anger. "Dr. Lane, you were ordered to remain at the station. You have violated direct commands and endangered yourself unnecessarily." "With respect, Commander, I am a council representative, not your subordinate," Rebecca replied. "And I have stabilized 23 survivors who need immediate extraction. The tunnel system offers a viable alternative route." "Your tunnel is too small for proper rescue operations," Taurek said. "We will proceed with the main breach as planned. Stay out of our way." The connection cut off. Rebecca looked at the survivors around her. They were watching her with a mixture of hope and fear. "He's going to get everyone killed," Norvin said quietly. "The facility cannot withstand that kind of force. The whole structure will collapse." Rebecca studied her map again. He was right. The geological data was clear. Heavy drilling and explosive breaches would destabilize everything. She made her second major decision of the day. "Then we extract them ourselves," she said, "through the tunnels, before Taurek brings this whole place down on our heads." Rebecca worked quickly, organizing the 23 survivors into teams based on their abilities and injuries. The gravity made everything harder, but she had learned to work through exhaustion during her medical training. 36-hour shifts in Earth hospitals had taught her how to function when her body screamed for rest. "Norvin," she said to the Centaurian engineer, "I need you to help me map the safest routes through the tunnel system. Della, your species can fit through smaller spaces than most. You will scout ahead and check for hazards." She assigned roles to everyone who was capable of helping. The most injured would be evacuated first through her tunnel route. The others would help her reach the trapped survivors deeper in the facility. The first tremor hit while they were preparing to move. The walls shook and dust rained down from the ceiling. Everyone froze, waiting to see if the structure would hold. "What was that?" someone asked. Rebecca checked her scanner. "Taurek's team has started drilling. The vibrations are destabilizing the whole facility." She activated her radio. "Commander, you need to stop the drilling operations. You are triggering structural failures throughout the complex." "Dr. Lane, I will not take operational advice from someone who cannot follow simple orders," Taurek replied. "My engineers have calculated the safe parameters. We know what we are doing." Another tremor shook the facility, stronger this time. A section of ceiling collapsed in the corner of the storage area. Everyone scrambled away from the falling debris. Rebecca did not bother arguing further. She turned to her group. "We need to move now. Every minute counts." They began their journey deeper into the facility. Rebecca led the way through the narrow maintenance tunnels, her helmet light cutting through the darkness. The tunnel was barely wide enough for her, and several of the larger species had to remove equipment packs to squeeze through. Behind her, she could hear Norvin directing others, his engineering knowledge proving invaluable as he identified which passages were structurally sound and which should be avoided. They reached the first trapped group after 40 minutes of careful navigation. 38 survivors were sealed in what had been a dining area. The door was jammed, but Rebecca and Della worked together to force it open enough to pass supplies through. "We're going to get you out," Rebecca called through the gap. "But we need to do this carefully and in small groups. Is anyone critically injured?" A female voice answered from inside. "5 people need immediate help. The rest of us are stable." Rebecca passed medical supplies through the gap while Norvin examined the door mechanism. "I can open this," he said, "but it will take time. The hydraulics are damaged." "Do it," Rebecca said. "I will treat the injured while you work." The critically injured were brought to the door one by one. Rebecca squeezed her arms through the gap to administer medications and set up portable life support units. Her shoulders screamed in protest as she worked in the awkward position, but she ignored the pain. The third tremor was massive. The entire facility lurched sideways. Rebecca was thrown against the wall. Her suit's emergency systems flashed warnings about impact damage. Around her, people shouted in fear and confusion. When the shaking stopped, Rebecca pushed herself upright. Her ribs ached where she had hit the wall, definitely bruised, possibly cracked. She pushed the thought aside and focused on her scanner. The main facility section just collapsed, Norvin said, his voice hollow. Taurek's drilling caused a catastrophic failure. The primary access route is gone. Rebecca pulled up the facility map. Red warnings covered half the display. Entire sections were marked as structurally unsound. Her tunnel route was now the only viable extraction path. She tried her radio. "Commander Taurek, what is your status?" Static answered her for several seconds. Then Taurek's voice came through, strained but controlled. "We are cut off from the survivors. The collapse buried our entry point. We are repositioning to attempt a new breach point." "Commander, you cannot keep drilling," Rebecca said urgently. "Every vibration destabilizes the remaining structure. You will kill everyone inside." "What do you propose, Doctor?" Taurek asked, and for the first time she heard uncertainty in his voice. "Stop all drilling operations immediately," Rebecca said. "Give me 12 hours. I can evacuate the survivors through the tunnel system." 12 hours? You have 147 people trapped in there. You cannot possibly evacuate that many through maintenance tunnels. "I can if you stop making the situation worse," Rebecca replied. "Trust me, Commander. This is what I do." There was a long pause. Rebecca could imagine Talrek weighing his options. His entire career had been built on decisive military action. Trusting a human doctor to solve a crisis with improvised tunnel evacuations must have felt like admitting defeat. 12 hours, Talrek finally said. But my team will monitor structural stability. If collapse becomes imminent, we extract whoever we can reach, regardless of your tunnel operations. Understood, Rebecca said. She turned to face the survivors around her. They were looking at her with a mixture of hope and doubt. She was one person, injured, working in crushing gravity with minimal equipment. The logical part of her mind said this was impossible. But Rebecca had stopped listening to the logical part of her mind years ago. Logic said a human could not perform surgery while standing in contaminated flood water during a hurricane. Logic said you could not treat 50 patients simultaneously during a mass casualty event. Logic said a lot of things that Rebecca had proven wrong. Listen carefully, she told the group. We are going to repair the internal transit system. It was designed to move equipment through the facility, but we can use it to transport people. Norvin, I need you to assess which sections of the system are still operational. Della, you will guide injured survivors through the tunnel network to my ship. Everyone else, you are going to help me become the most efficient emergency response team this council has ever seen. She looked at each of them in turn. We are going to save everyone, not because it is easy, not because it is logical, but because it is necessary, and because we can do hard things when we work together. The survivors began to move with purpose. Rebecca felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like the crushing gravity. 12 hours to save 147 lives. She had worked under worse conditions. Barely. The next 6 hours blurred together into a nightmare of constant motion and impossible decisions. Rebecca moved through the damaged facility like a force of nature, treating injuries while simultaneously coordinating rescue operations. The high gravity was slowly crushing her. Human bones were not designed for sustained 2.3 times Earth standard. She could feel her skeleton compressing, her joints grinding together with each movement. Blood vessels in her legs were starting to leak, causing internal bruising that would only get worse. She ignored it all. Norvin had managed to restore power to one section of the transit system. The cargo pods were small, designed to move equipment rather than people, but they could fit 3 or 4 individuals if everyone squeezed together. He rigged a manual control system that allowed them to call pods to different stations throughout the facility. Rebecca organized survivors into groups based on medical priority and ability to navigate difficult terrain. The most critically injured went first, transported through the transit system to the maintenance tunnel entrance where Della and others would guide them to Rebecca's ship. The less injured helped with rescue operations, using their species-specific abilities in ways that surprised even themselves. A crystalline species that normally worked as accountants discovered they could detect structural weaknesses by analyzing sound frequencies. 2 Delphinians worked together to squeeze through spaces that seemed impossibly small. Rebecca coordinated it all, making split-second decisions about routes and priorities. Her emergency medicine training had prepared her for exactly this kind of organized chaos. In a trauma center, you learned to keep 12 patients alive simultaneously while new casualties kept arriving. This was the same principle, just with worse lighting and occasional earthquakes. The 4th major tremor hit while Rebecca was treating a worker with a crushed leg. She grabbed the nearest support beam as the floor tilted at a crazy angle. Medical supplies scattered across the room. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness until emergency systems kicked in. Dr. Lane, Talrek's voice crackled through her radio. Structural analysis shows the facility is becoming critically unstable. You need to evacuate immediately with whoever you can reach. Rebecca checked her count. She had successfully evacuated 79 survivors. That left 68 still trapped in the deepest sections. Negative, Commander, she said while continuing to work on the injured leg. I have accessible routes to all remaining survivors. I need more time. Time is exactly what you do not have, Talrek replied. The remaining sections are in danger of complete collapse. I am ordering an immediate evacuation of current survivors and abandonment of rescue operations in the deep sections. Rebecca finished setting the bone and looked at the injured worker. He was young, barely an adult by his species standards. His eyes were wide with pain and fear. I'm not leaving anyone behind, Rebecca said into her radio. Dr. Lane, be reasonable. 68 deaths is tragic, but 147 deaths is catastrophic. You have saved more than half. That is a successful operation by any standard. Rebecca thought about her years in emergency medicine. She thought about the impossible choices she had faced in trauma centers. She thought about the time she had been told to stop trying, that the patient was too far gone, that resources should be allocated elsewhere. She had never accepted those arguments. Commander, I need 2 more hours, she said. I cannot give you 2 hours. The facility could collapse at any moment. Then give me 1 hour, Rebecca countered. 1 hour, and I can reach the remaining survivors. Taurek was silent for a long moment. Rebecca could imagine him in his command center, surrounded by displays showing the facility's deteriorating condition. Every instinct he had must be screaming at him to order a full evacuation. 45 minutes, he finally said. After that, I am sending my team in to extract you by force if necessary. Rebecca did not waste time arguing. Understood. Lane out. She turned to Norvin and the others who had been helping her. We need to move faster. I need volunteers to help me reach the deep sections. Several hands went up immediately. Rebecca selected 5 survivors who were physically capable and had skills that would be useful. Together, they moved deeper into the facility, racing against time and gravity. The route to the final trap groups led through a section that showed severe structural damage. Warning signs flashed on Rebecca's display, advising immediate evacuation. She led her team forward anyway. They found 43 survivors in what had been a storage facility. The group was trapped behind a collapsed tunnel section. Rebecca could hear voices on the other side, calling for help. Stand back from the debris, she called out. We're going to clear a path through. Her team worked together, removing rock and twisted metal piece by piece. The gravity made every lifted stone feel like a boulder. Rebecca's arms shook with exhaustion. Her cracked ribs sent spikes of pain through her chest with each breath. But she kept working. They cleared a gap large enough for people to squeeze through. Rebecca helped pull survivors out one by one, checking each for injuries as they emerged. Most were in surprisingly good condition, having been in a well-protected section when the collapses occurred. Move quickly to the transit station, Rebecca directed them. Follow the markers we placed. You have 20 minutes to reach the evacuation point. The survivors hurried away. Rebecca and her team pressed on to the final location, where 25 people were trapped in a collapsed maintenance bay. They arrived with 12 minutes remaining on Taurek's deadline. The maintenance bay entrance was completely blocked. Rebecca scanned the debris and her heart sank. It would take at least an hour to dig through safely. She did not have an hour. Norvin, she said quietly, what are our options? The Centaurian engineer studied the blockage with all 4 of his arms crossed in concentration. There is an old mining shaft that runs parallel to this section. It was declared unstable decades ago and sealed off, but it connects to the maintenance bay through a service corridor. How unstable? Collapse probability is estimated at 94% if we attempt to use it. Rebecca looked at the rubble blocking the entrance. 25 people on the other side. Families. Individuals with dreams and lives, and people who love them. A 6% chance is better than 0, she said. She activated her radio. Commander Taurek, I need you to guide my team to the old mining shaft, Section 7, Level 3. Dr. Lane, that shaft was condemned. Using it would be suicide. I know, Rebecca said. Send me the route anyway. Taurek gave her the coordinates without further argument. Rebecca led her team toward the sealed mining shaft, knowing she was about to do something incredibly dangerous. But saving lives had never been about playing it safe. The mining shaft entrance was sealed with a heavy blast door marked with warnings in 17 different languages. Rebecca read a few of them. Structural failure. Extrême danger. Authorized personnel only. Do not enter. She ignored them all and used her emergency override codes to unlock the door. The shaft beyond was dark and narrow, sloping upward at a steep angle. Support beams showed obvious stress fractures. Loose rock littered the floor. Rebecca's scanner painted the walls in shades of red and orange, indicating critical instability throughout the entire structure. "We move single file," Rebecca instructed her team. "Step exactly where I step. Touch only what I touch. If you hear creaking or shifting, freeze immediately and wait for my signal." She entered the shaft first. The gravity made the upward climb brutal. Each step required full concentration. Her legs trembled with fatigue. The cracked ribs made breathing an exercise in controlled agony. Behind her, Norvin and the others followed in careful silence. The only sounds were breathing and the occasional scrape of boots against stone. They had climbed for 10 minutes when the first support beam gave way. The crack echoed through the shaft like a gunshot. Rebecca threw herself against the wall and shouted for everyone to freeze. The shaft groaned. Dust rained down from the ceiling. For 10 terrible seconds, Rebecca was certain the entire structure would collapse on top of them. Then the groaning stopped. The shaft held. "Keep moving," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. They reached the service corridor that connected to the maintenance bay. Rebecca forced open the corroded door and led her team through. They emerged into a small antechamber with a sealed pressure door leading to the bay itself. Rebecca activated her external speakers. "This is Dr. Lane. Can anyone hear me?" A voice responded immediately from the other side. "We hear you. Are you here to rescue us?" "Yes." "How many survivors?" 25. "Several injuries, but everyone is stable for now." Rebecca studied the pressure door. It was designed to remain sealed during atmospheric emergencies. Opening it would require overriding the safety systems, which meant convincing the facility's damaged computer that opening the door was safe. Norvin moved beside her and began working on the control panel. "I can bypass the safety locks, but will take a few minutes." While he worked, Rebecca contacted Taurek. "Commander, we have reached the final group. Beginning extraction now." "Your 45 minutes expired 3 minutes ago," Taurek replied. "My team is moving in to extract you." "Negative, Commander. You will destabilize our position. Give me 10 more minutes." "Dr. Lane, the facility is failing. I have seismic readings that indicate imminent catastrophic collapse. You need to evacuate now." Rebecca looked at the pressure door, then at her team of exhausted volunteers who had risked everything to help her. 10 minutes, she repeated. The radio went silent. Rebecca knew Taurek was struggling with his decision. He could order his troops in and risk killing everyone, or he could trust her. Norvin got the door open. It hissed as pressure equalized and swung inward. 25 survivors rushed out, their relief visible even through their protective suits. "Move quickly through the corridor and follow the route markers," Rebecca instructed. "You have 8 minutes to reach the transit station." The survivors hurried past her. Rebecca counted them off. 23, 24, 25. She was about to follow when the entire facility lurched sideways. This was not a tremor. This was the beginning of total structural failure. "Run," Rebecca shouted. They ran through the service corridor and back into the mining shaft. Behind them, the pressure door area collapsed completely. If they had been 30 seconds slower, everyone would have been crushed. The shaft was disintegrating around them. Support beams snapped. Rock fell from the ceiling in increasingly large chunks. Rebecca pushed the survivors ahead of her, shouting encouragement, guiding them around obstacles. A massive section of ceiling came down directly above her. Rebecca saw it falling and knew she could not avoid it. She pushed the nearest survivor, a young Centaurian, out of the way. The rock caught her across the shoulders and drove her to the ground. Her suit's emergency systems screamed warnings. She felt something break in her left leg. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. "Dr. Lane," Norvin's voice sounded distant through the ringing in her ears. "Keep moving," Rebecca gasped in her radio. "Get them out." "We are not leaving you," Norvin said. Rebecca tried to push herself up, but her leg would not support her weight. The rock had her partially pinned. She could probably free herself given enough time, but time was exactly what they did not have. "That is an order," Rebecca said, trying to sound authoritative despite the pain. "I am right behind you." She was lying. They both knew it. Della appeared beside her, the Delphinian's flexible limbs allowing her to squeeze through the debris. She grabbed Rebecca with surprising strength. "My species does not abandon those who help us," Della said simply. Together, Della and Norvin lifted the rock enough for Rebecca to drag herself free. She tried to stand and nearly blacked out from the pain in her leg. "I cannot walk," she said. "Then we carry you," Norvin replied. He and another survivor created a makeshift harness from equipment straps. They lifted Rebecca between them and began moving up the shaft. Every step jostled her broken leg. Rebecca bit down on her pain and focused on staying conscious. The shaft was falling apart completely now. They moved through a constant rain of debris. Twice they had to stop and clear blocked sections. Rebecca directed them through the chaos, using her scanner to find the safest routes even while fighting waves of agony. They burst out of the shaft entrance just as the entire structure collapsed behind them. The blast of air from the implosion threw everyone forward. They tumbled across the floor in a tangle of limbs and equipment. Rebecca lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe through the pain. She could hear voices around her, people checking on each other. Someone was calling for medical assistance. She had saved them. All 25, all 147 survivors accounted for. Her vision started to narrow. The edges of her sight grew dark. She heard Norvin calling her name, but it sounded very far away. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was Taurek's face. His reptilian features twisted into an expression she could not quite identify. Then everything went black. Rebecca woke to the gentle hum of medical equipment and the absence of crushing gravity. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then memory returned in pieces. The facility, the rescue, the collapse. She opened her eyes to find herself in a medical bay aboard a council ship. Her left leg was immobilized in a regeneration sleeve. Bandages wrapped her ribs. Diagnostic displays showed various injuries in different stages of healing. A nurse noticed her awakening and hurried over. "Dr. Lane, please remain still. You have sustained significant injuries." "The survivors?" Rebecca's voice came out as a harsh whisper. "All safe," the nurse assured her. 147 individuals successfully evacuated. 0 casualties. Rebecca closed her eyes and let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. 0 casualties. Everyone had made it. How long was I unconscious? 3 days. Your body needed time to begin healing from the gravitational stress and impact trauma. 3 days. Rebecca tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain flared through her ribs. "I told you to remain still," the nurse said, but there was fondness in her tone. "You are a terrible patient, doctor." The medical bay door opened. Taurek entered, moving with his characteristic military precision. He stopped at the foot of Rebecca's bed and looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, he raised his hand in a formal military salute. Rebecca stared at him in surprise. The salute was one of the highest honors in Taurek's culture, reserved for warriors who had demonstrated exceptional courage under impossible circumstances. "Commander?" Rebecca said uncertainly. Taurek lowered his hand. "I called you weak. I said you lacked the fortitude for harsh worlds. I was wrong." He moved to stand beside her bed. "I have spent 40 years in military service. I have led troops through war zones and hostile territories. I thought I understood what strength meant. Force, overwhelming power, the ability to break through any obstacle." He gestured at the medical displays. "You taught me that I understood nothing. You saved 147 lives using methods I would have dismissed as impossible. You worked in gravity that should have incapacitated you. You made decisions under pressure that my decorated officers could not match. And you did it all while injured, exhausted, and without proper support." Taurek's inner eyelids flickered, that gesture of emotion his species rarely showed. "You are the strongest individual I have ever encountered. and I am honored to have witnessed your actions." Rebecca did not know what to say. She had spent so long being underestimated that genuine recognition felt foreign. "You came back for us," she finally said. "At the end, when the shaft was collapsing. You were there." "Of course I was there," Talrek replied. "You taught me what true strength looks like. The least I could do was try to learn from the lesson." Over the next week, as Rebecca recovered, survivors came to visit. They brought gifts, shared stories, and expressed gratitude in dozens of different ways across multiple cultures. Norvin brought her a piece of rock from the collapsed mining shaft, polished and engraved with words in multiple languages. "Water cuts stone," it read. "Strength flows around obstacles." Della visited with her entire family, 3 generations of Delphinians who wanted to meet the human who had saved their daughter. Even the worker who Rebecca had stabilized first, the one who had been dying from atmospheric poisoning, came to thank her. He was fully recovered, his respiratory system functioning normally. "The council is preparing a formal hearing," the nurse mentioned one morning while changing Rebecca's bandages. "There is some debate about whether you should face disciplinary action for disobeying orders." Rebecca was not surprised. She had known there would be consequences for her actions. The hearing was held in the main council chamber. Rebecca attended in a wheelchair, her leg still healing. She sat before the assembled representatives while they reviewed reports and discussed her case. Then the survivors began to speak. One by one, they stood and testified, not about what Rebecca had done, but about how she had done it. Norvin spoke about her ability to see individual strengths rather than species categories. Della described her calm leadership during chaos. The insectoid worker chicks, who had initially doubted Rebecca, explained how she had proven herself through actions rather than demands. Taurek provided a military assessment that praised her tactical decisions and crisis management skills. "She succeeded where I would have failed," he said simply. "That is the definition of superior strategic thinking." The senior counselor, an ancient being whose species had been part of the council for over 3,000 years, finally spoke. "Young species often try to prove themselves through displays of power. They seek to demonstrate physical strength, military might, or technological superiority." The counselor's many eyes focused on Rebecca. "Humans have proven something far more valuable. You have demonstrated adaptability in crisis, compassion under pressure, and creativity when conventional approaches fail." The counselor gestured to include the entire chamber. "We are offering you a position as Director of Disaster Response for the Galactic Council." Rebecca shook her head. "I appreciate the honor, but I cannot do this work alone. No one can." She looked at Taurek, then at Norvin and the others who had helped her. "I want to create a multi-species rapid response team, trained in emergency medicine and disaster coordination, combining human methods with the unique strengths of every council species." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Not to fight wars, to save lives, to be ready when conventional approaches fail and improvisation becomes necessary." The council debated for an hour before approving her proposal. Taurek immediately volunteered to handle military logistics and coordination. Norvin signed on as chief engineer. Della joined as a specialist in confined space operations. Within 6 months, Rebecca's rapid response team had successfully completed 5 missions. Different crises, different worlds, same principles. Adapt, endure, improvise, care. Rebecca stood in the observation deck of the team's dedicated ship, looking out at the stars. Her leg had healed completely. The scars remained, physical reminders of what she had endured. She thought about Taurek's words. "You lack the fortitude for harsh worlds." She had proven him wrong. But more importantly, she had proven something to the entire council. Strength was not about force. It was about flexibility, the ability to bend without breaking, to adapt when others could not, to keep moving forward when everything said to give up. Her communicator chimed. Another emergency, another impossible situation that required her team. Rebecca smiled and headed for the command center. Some people measured strength by what could be broken. Rebecca had learned to measure it by what endured. And in the vast darkness of space, where survival required more than just force, that made all the difference.